For those who gave us the feedback, thank you. That Lifehack series aims to provide you good information, tips and tricks, and what is new. Please let us know what you are most interested in. That Lifehack is the extension of the previous one, where we showed you the possibility to combine a graphic user interface with our scripting language. Now it is time to learn how to do that. My name is Rodrigo Correa from Numeca, Germany, and I will lead you to the fundamental understanding of a Python library called Tkinter. In the end of that Lifehack, you will be able to build your own graphical user interface, call that GUI from our Numeca application, and combine it with our scripting language. To follow that Lifehack, you need to understand the basics of Python. If you know the concept of variables and how to run a Python script, you're good to go. You can either use your local Python installation or the Python version from your Numeca application. However, to combine your GUI with our scripting language, you must use a Python 2.7 because that's the version our API supports. You can find the Python version from Numeca in the location where your Numeca application is installed. In my case, they are located at C Numeca software. You should be looking for a folder called Python64, and your Python is going to be included in that folder. So let's say the version from FineMarine, which is located here. I paste. Now inside that folder Python64, you're gonna find Python. Now you just need to call the file, which is from my app. So now I'm basically running that script from the Python version from my Numeca application. You see that the version is 2.7. Again, you should be using a version 2.7 in order to combine your GUI with our API. We will create a simplified version of the GUI that was presented in the last video. The idea is to develop a picture generator that could be used to prepare the final report to a client. Please focus on learning the fundamentals, because the code you get anyway. That's our goal, a very simple dialog box that will give us enough knowledge to create any kind of GUI you wish in Tkinter. The very first step is to import the Tkinter module. We do that by saying from Tkinter, import star, and star here means import everything. Then we need to create a window, and that window is the object that will receive all the widgets. And if you want to show that window to the user, we should be using a method called mainLoop. That method is responsible for updating the GUI so that it knows if the user interacts with it. So here's our object window, and then we need to call that method called mainLoop. Perfect. Now if I run the code, pi-2, look, I'm using the Python 2.7 version because later I want to combine that GUI with our API. And now here I just need to call the code name. Perfect, we have our window. Here, if I now press X, what I'm doing in it is just exiting that main loop. It means that everything I want to add on that window should be coming or should be added between the creation of that window and the calling of that main loop. We just need to learn how to add a widget to that window. And I'm gonna paste one example here. Now we're gonna create our first label, and the process I'm gonna show you, it's the same for every widget. So which widget do we want to create? Let's say label. If I want to create a label, we just create an object of that class. So if I want to create a button, I just need to change label to button, and that's it. It is that easy. So for label, and again for each widget you should do the same. You create the widget and then you should specify to where you want to add that widget. So I want to add that label to that window, the window I just created, and the text relates to which text I want to add to that label. And here we say I will be able to create my own GUI. Another thing which is very, very important that you need to know is something called geometry management. And the geometry management is the way you add or you glue the widget on the window. And there are two ways. One is called pack. Let me just run the code here, pi-2 CFView, run it. I went to the Python iterative mode. I have no idea why. pi-2. Yep. Now we get our window, and you see that we have our label. Look, look, look. If I resize, it's always in the middle. It's centered. One way to add or glue that widget, that window, it's called pack. Unlike pack, there is that second way called grid. You need to have at least two arguments. One is called row, and the second one is called column. And the reference is your top left side, and it starts with 0 because all the index in Python starts with 0. If I now run that code, it seems to be the same, right? You got the same result, but if I resize, you see that doesn't matter. If I resize that, it's always in row 0, column 0. So that procedure is the same for any widget you want to add to that window. What is very important, if I now want to create a new widget and I want to add to the window, I should respect the first geometry management of the first object. So let me just try to create a new one here. So I'll be using pack, and then I will just comment grid, and I create, I can call it, actually I can copy it. Here you say my button. Now I want to create a button, so I just call the button class to where I want to add that button, to that window, and the text I will say click me or click here. What I just want to tell you, my first widget that was added on this window, I used pack. So it means that I cannot now mix them up and say, hey, now that button on that window will be added using grid. You cannot do that. As label has used pack, now I should be using pack as well. Okay, so let's see what we get. If I now clean my terminal and run it again, look, we have our window and our button. And that's basically how you add widgets to a window. Now that you know the basics, what I'm gonna do, I will delete all the example here, cut that part here, and bring the real code. And I will go quite fast because you most probably understood everything I said, I hope. So here we just create the window, and there are a lot of things in between. And now I just need to add our main loop. Perfect. Okay. Our window is created, so I can just clean it, run our code, and it's empty. Perfect. So look at the object we want to create. We see that there is that nice frame where it's written input B2B. So that frame, you can think of that as a container frame, and you can add as many widgets as you want inside that container. And the name of that frame is called label frame. And why it's a label frame? Because you can give it a header. So how to create a label frame? Same as we did with button and label. You just call the label frame class. You specify to where you want to add it, and then you give a text, in that case input B2B. You will understand why I'm giving the field X in a second. Now what we want, I want to include, or I want to enter a widget, and there is one label widget and another one is called entry widget, and the entry widget is basically where the user add data or input data. So here I will just uncomment it. And then just look that I'm choosing pack as the geometry management for widgets on the window. However, for all the widgets inside the frame, which is here, so I'm creating a label inside that frame, and now I'm choosing grid. So for each widget, you cannot mix the geometry management. But as soon as you have a new widget, especially those container widgets, inside those container widgets, you can again decide if you want to go for pack or grid. So inside the B2B frame, I'm going to be using grid. So Label, we saw how to create it, and the new one is entry. How is entry? Same. We just create an entry object called entry, and you say to where you want to add it. So I want to add it to that frame, and then I give it a width. So here it's basically the amount of characters you gonna allow the user to enter. And now my label is in row 0, column 0. If I want to put one beside the other, so my entry now must be in row 0, column 1. Let me just run it. And there we are. The fill X here is basically because if I resize, the boundary of the label frame just follows my window, right? So here it's B2B, it's inside the label frame in row 0, column 0, and the entry is in row 0, column 1. That's exactly what you said, or what you did. Then we have another label frame, which is the contour plot. So let's just create that. Yep, it's there. So now we create a new label frame, and I call it quantity frame. Why quantity frame? Because we're going to specify which quantity you want to plot. So again, it's a label frame object. We specify now to where we want to edit. So see that that frame is added on the window. So do you remember, the first widget on the window has used peg. So now I should be using peg. Perfect. There I also use that fill X. Then I also use those fill X. Here I will maybe explain you later what I meant by that. So fill X, now you know fill X just to follow the window when I resize it. And now I want to add some check buttons. And here there is something quite interesting, because to add a check button, we need to specify some kind of variable. And in Tkinter, there is that int var, which is basically, you can think of that as a boolean. It's not really a boolean, but either or variable. It's like 0 or 1. Yeah. So I want to check if that check button is checked. And if it is checked, it returns 1. If it's not checked, it returns 0. And for that, you specify those int var. And then we give that int var. Actually, I assign that int var to that variable, pressure var. And we can give that pressure var to an argument called variable. And why is that important? As I said, because when you create the checkbox, you want to know if that checkbox is checked or not. So that's our first checkbox. And that checkbox, as it is the first, I can choose again between pack and grid. As I'm going to have 3, I prefer to use grid because I have more control. So the first is going to be row 0, column 0, the second one, row 0, column 1, and so on. So now then, let me just uncomment that code here. So as I said, and obviously you need to create those int var or those variables for each checkbox, because if you just call pressure var for each checkbox, when you click the first checkbox, all the checkboxes will be clicked together, right? So now if I save it, you see that we have one label frame, 2 label frames, both added to the window. Inside the first label frame, I have a label and an entry widget. I have, let's say, small space between them, but we can fix that. I have a new label frame, and inside the label frame, I have 3 checkboxes. Perfect. Now you see that I can check and uncheck that. Perfect. What is not nice here, I want to give some space between the label frames. In why? To give spacers, you should be using one thing called pad. And pad is either pad in X, so spacer in X, or pad in Y, or spacer in Y. So the first label frame is B2B frame. Yes. So here I add pad. I want pad first in X, and here I'll give some numbers, let's say 5. So what that's gonna do, look the difference, as 5 is too small. So yeah, can you see the difference between that label frame and that label frame? I gave a spacer between the boundary of the window and the boundary of that label frame. I also want to give a spacer between those label frames. So I also give a pad Y. So pad Y. Maybe 10 is too much. Nice. We have a nice pad between the frames. Now you can see that here, obviously, I'm going to have the same pad between the boundary of the window and the second label frame. So let's just fix that. Fix X pad. So I use 10. So I can go to the second label frame, which was this one. And then we just add that guy. So is it nice or not nice? It's getting better, but look, between the entry and the label frame, there is also not much space, right? So I can go to the entry and give some space in Y. So where is our entry for the first label frame? It's here, right? We can give now one pad Y, let's say 5. I clean it. Okay, see that now we have some space and perfect. It's getting quite nice. Now we can see that the user can type B2B 0.2, and I want to have a pressure plot, temperature plot, not entropy. Perfect. But look, there is no button. Then let's create our button. How to create a button? We just saw it. Here I'm gonna use something. You don't need to do that, but I just want to show you a nice thing. So you saw that there is that container widget, which is the label frame. You can also have another frame, but which is not visible. And what is that? So that frame or that widget is called frame. That's same as the label frame, but you cannot see that. So now that frame is going to be called apply quit frame. And I want to create my apply button and my quit button. And I'm going to assign those buttons in that frame. So the frame I just created, I create that apply button. It's a button object, and I will create it inside that frame. Perfect. So the apply button is going to have a text called apply. The quit button is going to have a text called quit. What is the difference between apply and quit? Because quit now has a command which says destroy. And that destroy means, hey, when you click that button, something should happen. And what will happen? It's going to destroy that widget. Which widget? The complete window. So we are forcing that main loop to break. So if I save it now, run it, look, there we are with our button. I forgot to mention that here, when I create that frame, as I said, it's not visible. I force all the objects or all the widgets that we add on that frame to be on the east side, on your right side. So that's the reason why they are here on the right side. So if I say now 0.1 and press apply, look, nothing happens. Why? Because I did not have that argument comment on it. However, if I just press quit, I'm gonna destroy that window, and there we are. What we are missing now is to add some functionality to that apply button, and for that we use the command. And the apply function is a function that I have already written to save our time, because I think that video is already long enough. So Ctrl X, and you just put it here. That's our function, and perfect. So we were able to create the GUI. We have the entries, we have the check buttons. Now we need to read the input from the user. Okay, now we need to remember what was the name of the variable. So everything inside B2B label frame, I called B2B, and then the widget. So there is the B2B label. We cannot get any information from, actually we can, but it doesn't matter. It's not important here, but we need to get information from the B2B entry. So B2B entry dot get. So dot get is the method we need to read the information from the user. And what's very, very, very important, every time you get information from the user, that's going to be a string. So if you're expecting an integer, you should convert the string to that integer. And in that case, you'd be using integer. So as I want to convert it to float, that's the reason why I read it. That's going to be a string, and then I put it in between, let's say, parentheses, and I call the built-in function called float. All right, here, pressure, temperature, and entropy. Remember those variables I just mentioned. If it's checked, we're going to get 1. If it's not checked, we're going to get 0. So then let's now run our code. And finally, our nice GUI has full functionality. Here I will say 0.8. I want pressure and entropy. I press apply, and here reading user input data, B2B 0.8, pressure 1, so it's checked, temperature is 0, it's not checked, and entropy is checked. Perfect. So if I just change, now I want temperature, apply, so now just temperature is 1. That's okay. And quit, it was already working, and then we close. So we have our GUI. Now how to combine that GUI with our API? That's going to be the topic of the next session. Alright, at this moment we have our GUI. Now, what we want to do? We want to create pictures from blade-to-blade views, right? Once we know the commands from CFView, we can just combine them. So how can I access the commands from CFView? We can first do that process manually. Open CFView, open the case. By the way, that's case the demo case for. I open the blade-to-blade, or I press the blade-to-blade button. I choose the location I want to have it, let's say 0.7. I can save it. Once you save it, that cut's going to be listed on the surface. I can select it, and now select the quantity I want to plot. Let's say absolute total temperature, and then the way I want to represent it. I will choose contour plot. So which way? Strip contour. Now, in my color map, I have two informations. I have stripes and the smooth information. I will just select or right click and select stripes only. Perfect. Now, how can I save everything I did in a Python file? I go to File, Macro, Save All. So here is my directory or working directory. I paste it here and type macro saved. There you are. Now we have all the commands from CFView. What to do now? We just need to have a look at this code. So I will just right click on it and open with my text editor, in that case Atom. Alright, everything we did can just be reduced to 7 commands. So the very first command, it's a very important one. That's the way you can access our API. Once you copy that command to the beginning of your Python file where you wrote your GUI, you're going to be able to call that GUI from CFView. Also use all the commands CFView understands. And here, as I said, it's very self-explained. Here we open the project, then we create our cut plane, in that case the B2B. We select that cut. Later, what we did, we just select the quantity, and then we plot it using strip, and then we just correct the color map. Let me just comment some things here. So first, I can easily say here, open the project or the simulation file. Here we are creating the B2B view or plane. And do remember, we chose 0.7, meaning that the B2B, or let's say I'll call it B2B, it's okay, it's good enough. So we select 0.7, and now we can also replace, and B2B should be here. By default, your first cut in CFView is going to be called cut1. What we can do, the last argument of that function actually is the name you can give to that plane. So I can create name plane or cut name, and then I'll give the name, let's say B2B, underline, and then I can concatenate, so do some string concatenation. I call it B2B. Why is it string concatenation? Because I'm converting that float to string. Now it's gonna be called B2B underline 0.7. All right, and I will just take that variable and place it here. Okay, now to select a cut, you have different ways to do that. You can either give the name. So now if I just take that variable and put it here, that works. Another way to do that, you can assign the cut to a variable. I'll call it like cut or my cut. Why not? My cut. Now I can take that my cut variable and just put it here. Okay, up to here we select our cut. Now we select the quantity field, selection, and what we can do, we can say quantity equals to, just copy it here, copy quantity or that variable and put it here. That's it. We are almost done. Let's combine that thing with our GUI. Okay, we are not far from our final objective. Why? What is the difference between that code and our GUI? So in that code, we just hard coded the information. So 0.7 here, I, Rodrigo, enter that number. And now we want to read that information from the graphic user interface. We just need to exactly take that script here and paste in our, let's call it GUI Python file, right? I was developing that GUI in that file called CFView GUI final. And you see that the first thing that you need to remember, that's how we talk to our CFView. So that's how our API allows you to talk to CFView. You just need to copy that comment and paste in your, let's call it first Python valid line. So the first and second are just comments, so it doesn't count. So my third line now I should edit. If you want to just to be sure, you can just, let's cut it and put it here. All right, now you are allowed to talk to CFView. Perfect. Do you remember that function, apply function? That's the function we assign to the apply button. So once the user hit the apply button, we're gonna call that function. And before, we were only displaying in the terminal all the information the user added. For instance, we were adding, or we were displaying the B2B, we were also adding if the checkbox was checked or not, and so on. Now, I basically copied that information from that file, the one I just explained to you, to here. So, first we create the cut. That's exactly what we did. Same, we select the cut. Now, here comes some difference. Why? Because now I should check which checkbox was clicked. Here I said the quantity is absolute total temperature. Here I should check if my pressure var, which is that funny variable, which is kind of a boolean which gets either 0 or 1. So if it's 0, it's not checked. If it's 1, it's checked. So if pressure var is 1, then you're sure that the user wants to plot the absolute total pressure. And same goes for the temperature and entropy. In that example, the user is just able to press one button, right? If you want to give the user the ability to enter more quantities, it's quite easy to change it. So if you want to try it, and if you face some hard time on that, just write us, I'll be glad to help you out. But just to emphasize, in this example, the user will be able to only select one out of 3, out of pressure, temperature, and entropy. All right, so we select the quantity, then that's the easiest one, and then we plot. That's the command for plotting, and that's the command for going to the color map and only select stripes. The user will hit apply, I will read all the information, execute all the CFView commands, and in the end, I will close or destroy the window. Let's see if that works. Now I can call that file. How to call? You can always go to File, Macro Execute, or just press K. Now my working directory is here, and our file is that CFView GUI final. Now we get our window. Quite nice. So let's then give 0.7 or 0.8. What do I want to plot? Let's say entropy. So if I press apply, look, we just got our cut called B2B on the line 0.8, and now we have entropy displayed over that cut. And that's it. And what about the color map? By default, it would get two informations, smooth and stripes, but you also only have the stripe. So if you want to print, you only need to go to File, Print. So let me just press OK. And then I have to save that thing. And then say, for instance, entropy. Now I'm going to generate that picture here. What about if you want to also include that feature in your GUI? What you should do? Now I don't know the command for that. I go to File, Macro, Save All. Again, I give the same path. I will say macro saved to, and now I'm sure that the last command of macro saved to is gonna be what? The print command. So open with atom. It's there. So there are a lot of things, but we are interested on that command. Perfect. You would need to just enter print my picture. Now just paste here. That's basically the resolution. So 1920, 1080 and the path. And that's it. If you just provide the path and the resolution, you'd be able to also save that picture. All right. So if you want, you can try to improve that GUI. But as I said, I cannot really talk about the entire Tkinter library in half an hour. And I know it's quite long, but the idea is to give you more than the basics, yeah? And I'm quite sure that with all the information I throw to you here or try to explain you, you're gonna be able to do that. If not, you write us and I'm gonna be quite happy to help you. Thanks so much.